We'll go ahead and throw it on. Okay, what's going on, guys? Caleb here, and I'm here with Dan, one of the students of identity closing. Today, we're going to talk about Dan's experience with identity closing. But yeah, for starters, Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well.
Sweet. So yeah, so I would say, Dan, where were you at before identity closing in your sales career? We'll cover a couple of things. We'll cover where you were at, sort of what your expectations were, what your experience is, and then we can kick it and kind of wrap things up with sort of how you're feeling and plans for the future. But yeah, where were you at prior to identity closing? How was sales? How was career? What's sort of your story to date with sales, you would say?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm a business owner, right? So, um, with that being said, every lead that I get, every call that I get, it's important for me, because you spend a certain amount of money on leads and on ads and marketing as a business owner. So, I wasn't sure, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I wasn't sure
Mhm.
if this program would be a good fit because I'm not like a closer, or I never really worked in sales. I've done some sales, but I've never been a closer. And I don't even know if I still am. I mean, I'm I'm getting there. But where I was is that I was really struggling with a bunch of concerns. And the biggest one really, for me at least, was I just need to think about it, right? Like that was the biggest concern that I was getting. And I just didn't know what to do. Like I had no idea. And I'd seen some of your content. And so that resonated with me, like watching you on YouTube. But
Mhm.
I was getting the volume, I was getting, quality clients, I was
Mhm.
getting some consistent leads, but I just wasn't closing them, man. Wasn't
Mhm.
closing them. And I knew that something had to change. I knew that my process, there was something wrong with it. And
Mhm.
so that's where I was. I was in a state where I needed a fix. I didn't know what to do. I had exhausted every resource that I had. And so
Mhm.
that's where I was at the moment.
Yeah, and I would say for the people who don't know, refresh them on, what is your business, your service, and sort of what sales training had you formerly had, if any.
Yeah, so the sales training that I had, I used to work for a company. It's a bigger company located in the Bay Area. I'm not going to say the name, but it rhymes with Jelp. So that was back in like 2013 when I graduated college, and it was a super like smile and dial type
Mhm.
of sales training. Like you just you're doing cold calls, and I was really bad. I
Mhm.
worked there for 12 months, for a year, and I closed one deal. So it was
Wow.
pretty bad, pretty bad. And that experience really jaded me and really like took me away from sales,
Wow.
not as a career, but like as like the mindset of selling. Like I didn't want to do it
Right.
anymore. That was
Right.
back in 2013. So then I said, you know what? I'm gonna do corporate America. Just gonna, work
Hmm.
for someone else, build someone else's dream, as they say.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but I knew like over time that like, like the entrepreneur inside of me and like the wanting to be a business owner, wanting to create, something, it was kind of rearing its head, not an ugly head, but just kind of, in my head, it was like, like you
Right.
want to do this. And so I got into photography, I got into video, I got into videography. And then around like 2016 is when I started to pick that up. And recently I made the transition to creating a video production company, specifically for lawyers and law firms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like my history in like 60 seconds or whatever, just kind of where I was at. And so
Yeah.
from there, I just, landed a couple deals, which were great. But
Hmm.
then there was like a lull and I
Yeah.
wasn't landing any deals. And that's kind of like what brought me to you.
Yeah, and well, for starters, I'd say kudos to that. I think the entrepreneurial journey is definitely something that a lot of people resonate with. I personally started in somewhat agency type stuff, but that's when I sucked at everything business, and I realized that if I hadn't mastered the skill of closing, it didn't matter what I did, sort of the same problems would follow with me. It's best selling products, best selling agency, and so, but yeah, and that's interesting. Some of those things I didn't know too about the experience there with sales, and yeah, I can definitely relate to that too of having when you stack a lot of else, or you're not properly trained in especially this craft, it's very easy to become jaded. It's just like, this is like, not me, not something I can do. I don't get what it is, but it's just, it doesn't fit sort of my realm or my paradigm. But no. And yeah, no, we met briefly through the Persuasion Academy. It was fun seeing you there, attend a couple calls. But so with that, with you finding identity closing, what were your expectations coming in? What were your sort of thoughts? What were you expecting? And then how was your experience?
Wow. I was expecting to always I was expecting to really be in a state where I could be uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason why is because anytime, in this journey that I'm going on, that I'm still on, anytime that I feel uncomfortable or I feel like, oh man, like I don't know if I should, your palms are sweaty,
Yep.
and that's how I know that like, okay, this is something that's going to work for me.
Yep.
because that uncertainty and that feeling of not really knowing if something is going to work, that is actually, in my opinion, a good sign, because you're at a place where you don't know what's going to happen. And once you get past that, and once you sit in it, and once you realize like, oh no, like I'm supposed to go through this uncomfortableness, I'm supposed to go through the knowledge of not knowing, if that makes sense. Like I don't know
Mhm.
what's going to happen next. And so that was the expectation. Like I wanted to make sure that I'm in a position where I'm kind of pushed, you
Yep.
know. And I knew that you were the person to do that for me, because again, going back to the content that you had put out, and you even mentioned Persuasion Academy. I only attended two, right? Yeah, only
Really?
two, yeah.
I
Um,
did not realize that.
yeah.
I thought it was,
Well,
I thought it was
the
like a,
third one, well, I guess three, but
yeah.
knew by the second one, I'm pretty sure the second one, I was like, okay, this is the guy. I just had to take care of other things, but for the most part, I knew like from the second one, I was like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
So
And
yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, and so with that, how long formally have you been in identity closing? And then, what was the win that brought us to the call today?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've only been in it for 2 weeks, and I'm still like going through the content and meeting with you, and just absorbing everything still. But with that being said, after the first meeting that we had, I got a lot of value, and I got a lot of like action items that I can do to change, my, navigating through concerns,
Hmm.
like getting past the smoke screen, right? And I don't want to give too much away, but like, it's like those one-on-one meetings, like for me, like that's what I needed. I needed like someone who could kind of guide me and coach me through the things that I shouldn't say or should say. And that really helped me. And it helped me so much that after 2 weeks, I jumped on a call with a lawyer, and I closed him for 15K. And so that was big for me, man. Like just like knowing like, okay, like I just need a tweak. And sometimes, and you probably know this too, sometimes it's just small little tweaks, just like
Yep.
little things that and I told you this before, like when we first like had our one-on-one, is that like a lot of the things that you'll learn when it comes to sales, you will probably learn it over time.
Hmm.
Right? It's just going to take time.
Hmm.
But if you don't want to, you know, if you want to shorten that time frame, then you kind of have to talk to someone that
Yeah.
knows what they're doing, because you
Right.
can't do it all on your own. And so for
Yeah.
me, like I told you, it was like, man, like I probably would have known and learned some of this stuff, but I didn't want to be stubborn. I didn't want to let my ego take the front seat. I wanted to make sure that I put myself in a position where, I'm able to have someone tell me, what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing
Mhm.
right. And I just didn't have that before, and so now I do. And so I think that
Yeah.
was the thing that really led me to closing that deal in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing that really amazes me too is, I mean, having been the teacher in this, your development over those 2 weeks was crazy. I don't know if you're really aware of how much, but I remember listening to your first call. I mean, back when we were in Persuasion Academy, and even one of the first calls we reviewed. compared to the most recent call, it's like you just adapted and absorbed all of this stuff. And I would say too, how did you feel about some of the tactics and the ease of using it? Because one thing I found with sales programs is sometimes they're a bit too aloft, but you'd mentioned something a moment ago, or at least maybe it was one of our other calls, just sort of talking about the actual ease of, I don't know, the utility of some of the things, the actual ability to implement it. How do you feel about the ability to apply what was learned for someone who might have been more beginner in sales?
Yeah, well, I would consider myself a beginner in sales for sure. But I also offer a different perspective, and that's because I've never done any type of sales coaching or sales program or anything ever, right?
Hmm.
Besides working with that company, back in 2013.
Yeah, for whatever
But
that's worth, right?
yeah, yeah, right. Um, so, but for you and for identity closing, um, for me, like my perspective is coming again at it as like someone who doesn't really know much about sales. But I know that when it comes to sales, like it is it's not a long game. It's more so just like it's a tweaking game. You just have to tweak little things, and obviously like there is a volume part of it too. But I think the experience and like the perspective I have is that the it's my first time, like, and this is a pretty damn good experience for never joining a sales program before. So I'm pretty happy with it, man. I'm really happy with it. So
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question. I don't know if it does, but
No, it does. And I would say too, I mean, it's one thing to, be a teacher, and I do pride in sort of my ability to teach and explain these things, but another thing to be a really good student. And I would say once more, you've definitely earned it with Stripes and Colors. It's just the speed at which you moved on everything and how coachable you've been. And yeah, with that, with sales trainings I've been through, it's nothing without the actual, I think the insight, the either the one-to-one time and just the questions to be asked on the platform to just have everything taken care of. Because I mean, I think my development came through a lot of different sales mentors over a much longer period of time. And you brought up a good point too. I think everything in sales you'll learn over a certain period of time, right? But you can either pay with your time, you can pay with your money. And sometimes, the time is what you need more money to be able to have, right? Especially if you've got a business with expenses and sometimes you're burning the wick on both ends, ignorance and the price of that. So, but no, absolutely love it. And what would you say with anybody who's skeptical? Maybe they've never done sales training before, they're beginner, they're not sure if this is what they should be doing with their business, they might think it's expensive. What would you say to anybody who's like, I don't know if sales is that one thing I need to figure out, or someone who's just on the fence?
well, honestly, like, and it's funny, like I even say this about my business, like identity closing and working with Caleb's not going to be for everyone, right? And I think for me, like, especially when in the 2 weeks that I've been here, right? I've also put in work, like I watch our calls, our one-on-ones and
Yes.
my calls. I watch them two, sometimes three times over, just to really like absorb it. So, I mean, if you're on the fence about this, I get it, but you also have to remember that like just joining something like this, any coaching program, like that's just like the smallest step really sometimes because you do have to put in work. Like the work
Mhm.
doesn't stop there, right? And so for me, I knew that going in, right? I
Mhm.
knew that like, okay, like I'm gonna get the coaching and I'm gonna have someone on my side of the table that's gonna help me. But like that doesn't mean that I stop everything. Like I need to actually go harder. I
Right.
gotta like be a savage and like really go into it and really dive deep into, the coaching that you give me. And so yeah, that's what I would say to someone that like, yeah, it worked for me. It might not work for you. Talk to Caleb, jump on a call with him. But at the end of the day, keep in mind that like, hey, like it doesn't stop here. Like we got to keep going, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and 2 weeks in, four more to go, and 15K over the line. Well, depending on how the deal is, but 15K signed on the books, and that takes care of the whole investment of identity, then some for those of you guys who don't know the price. So, but yeah, no, that's it. And yeah, once more, I'd say Dan, you really put it best in terms of you do have to work for it, right? I can give you guys the tactics and the tools, and I've coached enough people to know that if you're not really committed yourself to actually learning it and making it work, then you won't get that much out of it. It works on you as much as you work on it. And so, but yeah, no, Dan absolutely killed it. And for those of you guys who are curious of meeting Dan, I mean, he's inside identity closing, but for anyone who's skeptical, go ahead, book a call, click somewhere around this page. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the inside. Any last closing notes or thoughts, Dan?
No, man, thank you. Looking forward to learning more and closing more deals.
Sweet. Love it. Let's get it. See ya. Cheers.